Hi, I'm Karen Hurd, and thank you for joining us for Asking for a Friend Live. I'm absolutely delighted today. I have a very different kind of guest for you. We have Kurt Madden, and I don't normally read the bios, but I'm going to share a little bit about this because it is just so impressive. We're going to be talking about grit and tenacity. So, Kurt Madden began his career as a triathlete in 1980, finishing seventh overall in the Ironman World Championships. Went on to be a professional triathlete, finishing in the top 10 overall, then more times in the Ironman World Championships. Here's the other thing. He also won the Ultraman World Championships. Now, if you're not familiar with what that feels like, that's a 6.2-mile swim, a 275-mile bike ride, and a 52.4-mile run. Yes, you heard that right. So Kurt now is the CEO of a group of charter schools called the Collaborative. And we've had an opportunity to work with him and his team on some really important leadership work that they're doing. So let me welcome Kurt. Kurt, it's an absolute delight to have. I couldn't list all the awards, but behind you, oh my goodness, so impressive. And I have dabbled at, I've done a half iron, and that was plenty for me.
Mm-hmm.
So, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Karen. It's great to be here this morning.
So today we want to talk about grit and tenacity. And when I learned about your background, I thought, this is a really important topic for right now,
Mm-hmm.
because I think so many of us are just feeling like we are stuck in this perpetual long distance game, and
Mm-hmm.
it's exhausting, and people are tired. And so how do you tap into the grit? How do you tap into the tenacity and keep going when you're exhausted? And so I want to spend a little bit of time with you today. One of the questions, how does grit and tenacity you develop and tap into as a triathlete and in your training there, how does that translate over into your role as a leader?
Boy, that is the question. If we could get that solved and that answered, Karen, I think the world would be a better place. So let me start maybe in the world of athletics. I think I was kind of born to be a triathlete. I was very active in water sports, pretty good runner, and I figured, hey, I can ride the bike. And I jumped into it back in the day. I started off with some swim run swims in the late 70s, and then decided to go over to this crazy thing called the Ironman Triathlon on Oahu. That was before it really, really got big, and paid a $20 entry fee and figured, hey, what the heck? I'll swim the 2.4 miles, I'll bike 112 and get off the bike and run the marathon. And I think in preparation for that, it really prepared me for the grit and the tenacity that I would need to complete that event. That was, again, my very first triathlon. And it was really taking stock. And I think as leaders, whatever we're doing in life, even parents, that we've got to take stock on ourselves first to say, where is our grit factor if it's a 5-point scale? If it's a 2 or it's a 3, what might I do to raise it to a 4 or a 5? And in taking stock, it really allows you to assess where you are, of what you might do to up that game, but start with you. That's the one thing that I have learned to go ahead and do. And knowing that it's not going to be easy, it's going to be difficult, but most of it is literally from our shoulders up. It's in our minds. We're 20% better than we think we are. We know that for sure. I have a saying, commit not to quit, no matter what it takes in life. And I've been through a lot, just like you have. But I think that's where I would start with anyone. The tenacity, you've got to break it down. You've got to be tenacious. You've got to just hang in there longer than anyone else to say, I've got the vision, I've got the foresight. We will get to the promised land together. And I think just through that continual mindset of I've got the grit factor working for me, I know I can be tenacious, I'm leading by example, and come on, guys, we're gonna get to that finish line.
So that's interesting. So when you say tenacity, how would you define tenacity?
Well, I could Google it, but I'm really not going to. Tenacious means that no matter what you encounter, that you can adapt, you can pivot. And the big word that's out there right now in the sport of triathlons, also in our world of business or whatever we're doing, is resiliency. And I have encountered so many things out in my training. I've encountered so many things in those lava fields in Kona. And that's why it is so humbling to really have anything and everything happen, from headwinds to dehydration to people crashing on their bikes to cramps, to say, I've got to hang in there just a little bit longer. And you've got to have faith in yourself. You've got to have that inner confidence at the same time, coupled with humility. And I think those are two things that I've learned from both you and David that I use in my everyday life.
So thank you. So I know in addition to being a triathlete yourself, you do a great deal of coaching of other triathletes. And,
Mhm.
say someone is, they're at a point and they're feeling like, you know what, I don't think I can do this. And you know that they can. How do
Mhm.
you help someone tap into their own confidence and nurture that?
Mm. Yeah, I think the thing that I've learned in coaching, if it's a triathlete or maybe it's one of my direct leads or someone else, I think what's really, really important is to really get into their hearts. It sounds something that is not doable, but it really is. It's kind of like a child, and you can appreciate this as a parent. Once you get into their hearts, you can get into their heads, and you've got to develop that relationship to get great results. So see if they can open up and talk on a more personal level and put trust in you that you are that Sherpa, you know that you're going to do great things with them. So it's kind of a delicate dance when you can get to that point. But I can tell you honestly, when you can get to that point that I'm going to call harvest, it is so invigorating and it is so exciting because you're growing them and they believe in themselves. And most people I find, they just don't have that confidence. They don't have that confidence to engage and push a little bit harder.
Nice. So you're using the word harvest, which I think is really interesting, uh, because you don't just go pick up and run an ultra triathlon, right? It is you're harvesting all
Mhm.
of the steady stream of work and build that you've done along the way. It's an interesting way to think about that. So let's now shift to your leadership role as a CEO of the collaborative.
Right.
How do you apply some of the same things that you've learned over the decades of being an athlete to that role?
Sure. Yeah. Well, in the world of triathlons, I tell people that first of all, a lot of people contact me and they want to get into the sport. And the first thing I tell them, this isn't for sissies. It really isn't. And then I shift my role to, where we are right now with the collaborative. And really what I've tried to do, if I could leave my legacy, which is something that I reflect on daily, it is developing that ecosystem. It's developing that culture. And I think when your culture is sound, if it's in the world of triathlons or in the world of business, I know in the collaborative, we have really, really, really focused in on that. And I really take stock on myself. If I'm growing or learning, I take stock on our leadership team to do that. But I think the vision that I would have is that I want to have enough professional development that it's almost like a Home Depot, that you can walk into it and anything that they might need, if it's a book, if it's a webinar, get together with this person, because if my leaders are growing at a faster rate than our students or children, to me, that is the greatest place in the world to work, to have a plethora of resources to say, no, there's no finish line. See, we're never, never done. We go through cycles, but that North Star, it is the joy in that journey to say, no, we are on a mission. And our mission is to do the very best we can, because I believe, I guess, just from my background of growing up in a very, very kind of a dysfunctional home, inner city, first person in my family to graduate from high school. Oh, wait a minute, I've got an associate. I've got a bachelor's. I've got a master's. Wow, that is really good. But the moral imperative is, in this day and age, the real vaccine for poverty, it comes down to one word. It's education. And that's for our students, but more importantly, being lifelong learners.
Oh, I love that. And I did not know that whole backstory about you. So that's so powerful. And I can see why you're so passionate about the work that you do in education as it relates to that. So, it's interesting as you and I and the conversations we've been having. One of the things that I've really been struck by in our work with you is
Mhm.
how open you are. We were talking about something. I'm like, Kurt, you already know this stuff. You don't need to learn this stuff from us. And you're like, I am always looking for ways to learn. I'm always looking for ways to develop and, see how I can use this. And thought that sometimes we run into executives who say, yeah, I've already got it handled. Now I just need you to come fix my people, right? And that is not what, I mean, your approach is definitely a collaborative approach. And so
Yeah.
you want to talk a little bit more about like how you get it in
Mm.
it with your folks in terms of leadership development?
Yeah, I think again, I've really adopted that phrase of being that lead learner. That it's great to have a title of a CEO, but I think I'm at the point in my life where those things don't mean all that much. But if I can be that lead learner, and really when I work with our people in the collaborative, even triathletes, I tell them I'm a student at heart. I show up to say I want to learn even more and more, and I think modeling that, it's that growth mindset that we talk about. And I think in doing that, you're going to get a higher level of performance, or you're going to get better results. And it's also the collective genius of the group and that intellectual curiosity. And I think that is so invigorating that it really, really keeps you, again, humble. But at the end of the day, you're going to get a better results when you really open up some dialogue to say, let's try to punch holes in a certain idea or initiative that we're working on. It's not going to be personal. I definitely need you to speak up. But I know that the team I work with a couple of years ago, we were in a retreat, and they're typically younger than me, and it's funny they kind of call me coach. But I went around the room and we just talked about our years of experience, not as a student, but really in education. And I think it came up to like 235 years. And I told them, I said, you know what? Here's the deal. Whatever we encounter, we're going to figure it out together. I know we will, because that right there should give you that confidence to say, hey, we've been in some rough games before, or some tough triathlons, or tough things in life.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's kind of cool that you're not out there alone. And in doing that, I think also, Karen, the other thing that I've learned is that after action review, the debrief. We didn't schedule the finish. Gosh darn it, we had it right there. It's just like totally lined up. Let's back it up. Let's go over it one more time. And I think in doing that, if you continue to do those checks and balances and try to get to that point where your organization is not quite automated, but I'll use the word turnkey,
Mm-hmm.
make it fun and make it engaging and make it like a family. It's like, wow, this is the greatest place in the world.
Yeah, that's so empowering. Add up the years of experience of everyone on your team. And gain the confidence from there. Okay, David has our first asking for a friend question. When you have those moments that you're wondering if you can continue, what conversations do you have with yourself that helps you keep going?
Boy, I think we're going to call those dark spots or dark moments. Maybe I should start in the world of triathlons. That when you look at a day that you're going to swim 2.4 miles, you're going to bike 112, you're going to run the marathon. The first thing is that when you get off that bike, it's like, oh my goodness, what was I thinking? I'm going to now start a marathon. And most people, like, think 1% of the population in the world, they run a marathon. But it's that dark spot to say, I could end it right now. I could just grab my gear and go to the condo. But you know what? I've got to overcome that. I've got to keep going. And it's really that mindset. You've got to really believe in yourself to say, I'm going to have major regrets. And the moment I want to ring the bell, it sounds like the right thing to do, but you've got to just hang on there a little bit longer. So the conversations I have is just really saying, I've got to go a little bit longer. Just give me 10 more minutes. I know another good example was in 2017 over at the World Championship. Unfortunately, my wife had a really, really severe situation come up. She had to be life flighted off of the island on the big island over to Oahu. And it's that moral imperative. Should I race? And she's like, yeah, don't. No, I want you to race no matter what. And I'm like, oh no, I'm having doubts. And it was just so ironic that God, the swim was fantastic. One of the best swims ever. Got out on the bike and just killed it, through the lava fields, got on the run. And all of a sudden I got to like mile 14 and it's like, wait a minute, my legs are not working. What's going on? Is there a message? I was in a complete dark spot. But just hanging in there 5 or 10 minutes longer, I just said, no, I just got to keep my momentum. I've got to keep my head in the game. And it was so cool because God, I got up to about mile 23 and I'm going like, come on, Kelly, we've got this. And people are going like, who's Kelly? And I said, oh, she's my best friend. She's my soulmate. She's my wife. But I got to that finish line. And then I shift to the world of work. Guy, we've all had dark spots. You get to the point sometimes where, again, you just want to ring the bell and say, I'm done. No,
Yeah.
no, I'm walking away from this. I don't want to deal with it anymore. But you're saying, no, wait a minute. I am a professional. I've got to live with myself. I've got to get this organization to a better place. So I hope that, and it's very common. And I'm raising my hand because I do have dark spots.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it's comforting to hear, actually. So, it's interesting when David hikes mountains. He's a big, really loves to hike 14er mountains. And sometimes I tag along. And a lot of the times I don't love being at no oxygen doing that. And one of his favorite things is, well, we just need to get to the next Karen, or we just need to get to here. I'm not saying you have to finish it. And I'm just saying, let's just get to that and then let's see how we feel. Right. And I think that's in business or in triathlons, just okay, chunk it down, break it down for people.
Yeah, and real quick, Karen, I can add to that. This is a
Yeah.
true story. We love Colorado, and my wife looked up at a mountain when we were there years ago and said, "We're going to hike that mountain." And I said, "Oh, we are okay." The boys were 3 years old. Our boys were 3 and 5. We got to about on Mount not Everest, Elbert. We were
Okay.
that mountain, the highest, 14er. We got to about 13,500 feet. My 5-year-old said, "Dad, I'm done. I'm sitting on the ground. I'm not going." I said, "Oh, really? Well, you know what? Your brother's 100 yards ahead of you. You're going to get on my shoulders, and I'm going to take you to the mountaintop." And here he is now. What? He's 36 years old. He still tells that story. "Dad, I don't know what you were thinking, but you didn't give up on me. You hung in there." And I do that with people. That's so important. When people get in those dark spots, we've got to come alongside them and say, "No, no, you can do this. You're just so gosh darn close. Let me just push you, encourage you a little bit more." And once it's all done, they'll come back here and say, "You know what? That's exactly what I needed."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, so you're talking about breaking it down and getting in people's heads and encouraging their hearts. What other advice do you have for people who are leading people who are tired? And it's the most common conversation I'm having now with our clients. People are saying, I'm really seriously worried about the mental health of the people on my team. And I had an interesting conversation yesterday where one of our leaders said, I feel like I'm taking on all of their emotion too. And I imagine that you have a good bit of experience with that. What other advice would you share?
Yeah, I think that mental health aspect is paramount. I think that's something that we overlook often, that we're so focused on task. I think that as I've watched our world change, that everything is immediate, everything is urgent, everything needs to get done like right now because of all the access we have to information. Sometimes you really need to block things out to create what I'm going to call white space. To say I'm going to have like some quadrant 2 think time,
Mhm.
planning time. All the devices are going to go off for 90 minutes or 2 hours, and really shift that over to say I've got to take care of me. It could be simple. It could be yoga. It could be walk. It could be painting. It could be getting a massage. It could be checking in with a family member. It could be gardening. But I think that balance in life is so, so critical. I know for me, my diversion, it should be pretty obvious. It's swim, bike, run, and have fun. And I can do that because I think for me, it puts me in that surreal place and time that people are not all around me. I find joy. I mean, even this morning, Karen, I got up at 4 o'clock in the morning and I swam 6,000 yards, but I was in the water. It was so relaxing, so enjoyable. In doing that for almost 90 minutes, that I've started my day that way. The rest of the day, I don't care what comes my way because you know what? I am good. I've taken care of myself. And I think with some people, that's one thing. You've got to get into that daily mindset. Start with you first. Take stock on yourself. Take care of yourself and model that. And I think that's very important versus, well, I'm the CEO or I'm the mom and I've got to work 36 hours to show my kids that I'm going to be that workhorse versus, no, I am going to definitely lead by example, but I've got to model going off the grid a little bit. I think the more we can do that, because I see the same thing all the time, and it really hurts me to see that. I've been in several webinars where I'm literally shocked and stunned when organizations come in, and 70% of the people say exactly what you say. I wish, Karen, I could just run over them with you and David and the team and say, you know what, we can get you to a better place. So I think that's something that we can do, that it's important to get great results. And I know that it's such a competitive world and it's so urgent, but we've got to go back to, again, what you and David talk about. What's the most important thing? How can we develop those relationships? And at the end of the day, to me, those relationships, if I had to pick one or the other, I'm going to shift to relationships versus results.
Mm-hmm.
And then also the last thing is, I think, playing the long game. Is that we get so hyper-focused on the moment of that first initial task. If we could push that out, and I think for me, that's one thing that I've learned in the sport of triathlons, especially in the swim. I'm just loving it, but I've got to plan ahead to say, wait, I've got to bike 112 miles. And then I'm in the marathon and I've got to break it down to 10-minute chunks. And then I've got to say, wait a minute, I've got to get focused on that last 10K. When I get to mile 20, and people, it's just like, people are just giving up. They're not believing in themselves to get to that finish line. So play that long game. And, if you have a setback and you get knocked to the ground or get kicked to the curb, or someone literally kind of gets in your face a little bit and pushes back, accept it for the moment, but you've got to get right back up and play that long game, because I've learned that in a moment or two or a day or three, something great is going to happen to you that just comes across your screen and say, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that I didn't give up on myself.
Nice, nice. So I can't possibly talk with you and not ask you about discipline.
Mm.
Because and how do you get, what is your secret to being disciplined enough to be able to do some of the things that you do?
Boy, that is a very good question, and I've been asked that question before. Probably I would start off to, as a child, I think my dad was very, very strict. He was probably beyond strict with me, and that's one thing I try to do as a parent, not quite be so strict. But I think with me, I know that when I can be disciplined, when I can get things done in such a way that, it's tough to get started. I think the biggest thing with discipline or starting tasks is just to overcome inertia. But once you do that and you get into that routine and you get into that structure of doing it day after day after day after day, it's like, hey, this is what you need to do. It's not whether I want to do it. I can make a million excuses of why I shouldn't go out and train, or I shouldn't check in with one of my direct leads or one of my board members about an issue that was really, really tough. But I've learned it's better off to do that. Don't second guess yourself, and that discipline and that consistency as a triathlete or athlete, or even as an executive, a CEO, or anything that you do in life, that discipline is really, really, really key. And it's just something that's very, very essential.
So do you plan your entire week out and time block the things and how you're going to spend your time, or is there what methodology do you use?
Yeah, I do plan the week out, but I've also learned in my position that I've got to have some flexibility in there, because things do come up, say at home, things are going to come up at work. But I tend to be very disciplined that I get to bed at a reasonable hour. I try to get to bed by 8 or 9 o'clock. I'm up at, again, 4 o'clock in the morning. That's actually the best time because most people are sleeping. So I've got a good 2 to 3 hour window to get some really productive work done or get my training done. That way, when my workday starts, that I'm good. And then on the weekends, my wife, after 40 years, she still loves it and she understands it, that I know that I'm doing a lot of training or doing things that I can't do during the week. But I think in doing that, when you finish an event, again, like an Ironman triathlon, just like, with the World Championship in Kona, because of COVID, we haven't had it for 2 years now.
Mm.
And it just, actually, it was supposed to be last Saturday, and it just kind of broke my heart. I had to stay away from sharp objects for a few days. But it's delaying that gratification to say, I've only got like 360 more days to get there again. So it's one of those things, but it's being disciplined. And I'm going to shift everything, because I'll be racing in Waco, Texas, a week from Saturday. I've never been to Waco, Texas, but I'm really looking forward to it.
Okay, great. All right, Kurt, as we wrap up, I'm going to have you finish with your very best piece of advice. But before I ask you that, do you have one like great story from any of your races that would be fun for people to hear?
I do. And anticipating that question, Karen, that's one thing in my job that I try to do. It was really in the 2019 Ironman World Championship in Kona. So again, creating the stage, you can imagine you've got 2,500 people there. It's everyone is just pumped, and you're looking out on the water and say, oh my goodness, once that cannon goes off, the day has begun. So, the day starts off, there's thousands of people there, all the media. This is like the World Series, and there's no turning back once you take that first stroke. Awesome swim, no issues at all. Got out there on the bike, and it got warm as the day progressed. The last 20 or 30 miles as you're coming back into Kailua Kona, typically through the lava fields, it's about a 30-mile-an-hour headwind. So you can kind of pick up on that vibe that there's not a lot of conversation when someone passes you on the bike or you pass someone else. It's more of that look of, I can feel your pain, and misery loves misery. And then getting out on that marathon to say, oh my goodness, here we go again. This is a 26-mile run. I think the temperature, it was so funny in Kona, they're going like, yeah, it's a cool day today. It was only 94 degrees. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it is toasty. So cruising through the first 6 miles or so on a Leahy Drive, no issues at all. Came up Palani Hill, made a left-hand turn, went out to the energy lab. I'm at mile 18, and I see two of my athletes that I'm coaching. And I'm like, you cannot give up no matter what. You have got to get to that finish line, because if you don't, I'm going to come hunt you down as your coach. And then the darkness starts, and I'm at mile 23, the last little hill, and it's dark, and I'm looking, and all of a sudden I thought it was like a hallucination. I looked up, and here comes a runner going out. Karen, double amputee. Double amputee. And I'm thinking, God, I'm hot, I'm sweaty, I've got a cramp, I'm sunburned. I'm at mile 23. I stopped and I said, man, you are the Ironman, and gave him a fist bump. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I've only got a 5K to go. This guy's like at mile 12, and I'm singing the blues, and this guy doesn't have two legs, and it's just, wow. And then to make that turn and come down and hit those last 150 yards to schedule the finish, to say, guy, I'm on a Leahy Drive. I've done this for like 40 years. How many people's lives have changed by this last 100 yards? So I finish it, but I'm thinking in my mind, I want to be that guy. I want to feel his tenacity, his grit, everything that got him there. And it really put me in check to say, I'm like this big. That guy deserves everything that the winners receive. So
Yeah.
it was so inspiring. It really, really was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, so inspiring. And then you think, oh gosh. And sometimes I go out for a 5K run and it feels like what? Oh, great. Well, Kurt, please leave us with what is like your final one last piece of advice for our listeners?
Well, as I said earlier, probably the thing that I would say is that, no matter how bad it gets, you've got to commit not to quit. You really, really do. That's one thing I've learned, and it's been something that I check myself constantly on, that we're in this together. That being vulnerable, going into dark spots, doubting your confidence, doing missteps, it's everything that we do. But I would say keep culture a top priority. Keep growing and learning a top priority. Making yourself better every single day, and everything that you do it with pride, do it with enthusiasm, and do it in such a way that there's always integrity and there's trust along the way. And I think in doing that, if you can check all those boxes, you know what? When you get to that point in your life where you're right in the sunset, you can look back to say, hey, I got her done.
Oh, beautiful. Kurt, thank you so much for joining us today. And we loved all of your insights, and we'll continue to look forward to our work together.
Thank you, Karen.
Okay, so thank you so much for joining us on Asking for a Friend. We have a really a great guest coming up next, Liz Wiseman, and she has a new book coming out. So we're going to be talking about impact and influence at work. So hopefully you will be able to join us on November 5th. Thanks so much.